thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you coming. I know there's some other tracks, and I think this is going to be an exciting one. We all got a chance to talk as a group, talk one-on-one. There's some really interesting stories I think we'll get to hear today. We hope that the end result is you guys get to hear some things that you can take back. You can ask some questions. We're all here the rest of the day if you guys come up with some things that you wanted to ask but didn't get a chance. So we'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to go straight into it. I'd love if you guys just take a minute and introduce yourselves.
Sure. Koomen, working for KLM Royal Dutch Airlines and product owner virtual reality. Working with virtual reality since 1996. Got back on it on 2015 when someone gave me a cardboard and started to play with it, show it to my manager, and she said, well, this is awesome, you have to make something. So to keep it short, she gave me a bucket of money and she said, just make something out of it, and I created a virtual evacuation training for the hangars, for ground crew, which was such a big success that now I've got a team with 9 people on KLM and train people like cabin crew for flight safety. What else do we have? The ground crew, of course, catering services, and flight crew.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Lubaszka. I'm with Gensler. Gensler is the largest and most profitable architecture firm in the world. I lead creative media for our Southwest region, which is all about our implementation, strategy, and production of augmented and virtual reality applications to help architects create design visualizations for clients.
My name is Ed Moore. I'm with Chevron. I've been with Chevron for about 10 years. I lead the Industrial Internet of Things R&D portfolio in our emerging tech organization at Chevron. We've been working with AR and VR for about 3 years now in just that specific area.
Good afternoon. My name is John Rygg. I work for Kiewit. Kiewit is a Fortune 300 construction company. It's been around about 135 years. We build just about everything but homes. So bridges, dams, power plants, offshore oil rigging platforms. My role at Kiewit is in Kiewit Technology Group, part of the IT group of Kiewit. I work as enterprise architect, focusing on technology strategy and emerging devices. We've been working with HoloLens and VR for about 3 years, so we've had a great time doing that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Kelly. I'm currently with Vuzix, one of the suppliers of the hardware for augmented reality and smart glasses. In my role currently at Vuzix, I'm leading some innovation projects as well as strategic partnerships. Before Vuzix, I spent about 5 years at GE in a variety of roles in manufacturing and aviation, as well as building out some IoT software on their platform.
Terrific. Well, I think that gives you an idea. We're going to have a really diverse panel, so I'm going to jump right in. So maybe, Chris, I can call upon you. Would you mind just giving a little brief overview of augmented reality and what that means kind of in your environment? Oh, I'm looking at you, but I meant you. When that happens, I'm looking at Alex, saying Chris.
Augmented reality, you said? Sorry, the question was?
Yeah, so just your view of augmented reality. I thought we'd just define augmented, virtual, and mixed reality. So I'm just going to kind of go down the row.
For me, mixed reality is actually the entire scope between real reality and virtual reality. Augmented reality somewhere between there, I guess.
Yeah. Megan, would you kind of give your take on the three, augmented reality, virtual, and mixed?
Sure. So virtual reality is when your environment is completely replaced, you're totally immersed. We'll use that to have a client do a walkthrough of their building before it's built. Augmented reality is when you can have a digital overlay on your real world environment, so you'll still be seeing both spaces. We'll use this for clash detection and overlay something like a new stair on a construction site digitally, so we can see if there are any conflicts with something like the mechanical systems or the way the ceiling's been built. Mm-hmm. And then mixed reality is something we're exploring where there's real world interaction with this augmented overlay. So you'll still see your environment, but it'll do things like pick up the lighting. Maybe there's other patterns in the environment, like a table that a small creature would be on, that it might fall off the edge of the table. So some sort of dynamic playback between the two environments.
Perfect. Ed, how about your take on how Chevron feels just about the three areas?
Yeah, so mixed reality is that full spectrum from AR to VR is the way we look at it. VR is obviously the full immersion, taking the person into the digital world, and you lose pretty much full awareness of your physical environment, versus the AR environment is bringing the digital data into our physical world. So AR is really where we are spending the majority of our time right now, because Chevron's on a digital journey to really digitize all our work. And so the problem we have is we have all these facilities, some of them are over 100 years old, and they don't have gauges, they don't have all the digital data that we have out there. So bringing all that sensor data to the operator in the field in real time, and basically making that, physically there or appear physically there.
Hey, John, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, AR and VR has been pretty well defined already here with this, but from my perspective, it's a matter of the use cases of if you can interact and collaborate with somebody. In the VR environment, you're basically putting a bag over your head, and you lose all interaction with anybody around you. In the AR environment, I can lead a group of people around, I can point at things, they know I'm talking to them, they know the space. It's a much more collaborative, almost more business-like environment, whereas I feel, the VR environment is more of an entertainment or a gaming environment. It certainly can be used for business, but it takes you away from that collaboration or that interaction.
Yeah. Do you guys have a focus? Like, you think about mixed AR, VR? Like, do you say, we're going to build something in this particular medium? Is that discussion happen?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about that a lot. And when we first got the HoloLens, we'd have arguments over and over again that we're building stuff, and they're like, that's a VR use case. Because we want to walk people through a building and see an entire building, and we're like, no, it doesn't really matter how you use it. I think it's just a matter of what you want the experience to be. In a training environment where we want to train people to work at heights, putting them in a VR environment to where it's much more realistic and gives them a better idea of what it's going to be like is a much better experience. If we're walking people through an environment, we're giving them tours of the building and interacting with a group of people, we want to be able to see each other and interact. AR is a much better experience.
Excellent. Alex, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's been covered pretty well. From my viewpoint, I think augmented reality, it can kind of get mixed with mixed reality. Some people kind of define those simultaneously. I think with augmented reality, it's just putting that digital content over the world, whether that is in more of a heads-up display fashion. So wherever you look, the content follows you, or it's actually positionally fixed on an image target or geolocation. I think that can kind of be all lumped into augmented reality. When you start getting into the mixed reality, I think Megan defined it well. You're placing something specifically on a table. You might bring in lighting from the real world into the digital model. There's some really interesting examples of that where the ball has a shadow because of where it sits on the table. I think that's where you're starting to get into the mixed reality. And then again, I think one other term that is kind of also lumped in there that you don't hear about as much, but it's very prevalent in enterprise, is the heads-up display. So that's even, some of the hardware that you'll see here, Vuzix provides that, some others as well, is more of a heads-up display, and that, I don't want to have that get lost because that is something that is very powerful for a lot of these enterprise use cases.
Yeah, it's a good point. Kind of in that, getting into, so as I talked to you guys, you had kind of a mixed approach. Sometimes it was multiple hardware platforms and software platforms, sometimes a single hardware platform. I was curious if you'd talk a little bit about the differences between what you can do today and what your customers, whether that's internal customers in training or whether that's the external customers. Is the experience equal what you guys can do with the technology with what they expect? Megan, would you mind maybe?
Oh, sure. So Gensler's a design firm, so we have many designers that use different types of software platforms. So we've taken kind of a platform agnostic approach to our VR, AR hardware and software capabilities. We also have some external partnerships and some developers in-house. So part of that has been really interesting because we've had the opportunity to test everything. Pretty much every device or software platform on the market, someone within the firm has tried, and then we've kind of reported back to each other what our results have been. One thing that designers are still really wanting and clients are really wanting is a photorealistic, simultaneous location and mapping augmented reality experience. That's kind of the holy grail for us. And right now, there's limitations to a lot of the hardware to kind of get it there, and also to work with our existing complex geometry and port it to a device that would be able to handle something that complex, still have a texture and material-rich visual quality, but that's kind of where we're hoping to finally end up.
Right.
And we've done small tests, but things are still, not quite there in terms of really beautiful geometry. We're selling design, so it's really important for us that the design is compelling and it doesn't look like a video game.
Sure. Hey, John, I think just kind of on the same theme, I know you're going, talking to end customers and architects and all that with the technology. I'd be curious your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's a little bit different. A speaker yesterday closed with a line that said, people don't buy drills because they want drills, they buy drills because they want holes. In my group, people don't exactly know what the hole is. So from the technology perspective, I spent a lot of time going out to our different areas of the company, just showing them what the technology is and what it's capable of doing, and getting their feedback on how they could use it. So they have a very open mind when I get to them. It's not a design situation where they're expecting it to be photorealistic or this is what I want my building to be. A lot of times we work in BIM models that are kind of cartoonish anyway. So just being able to overlay a BIM model over a building and see all the mechanical aspects of it is very exciting to them, and being able to have almost like X-ray vision. So it's a superpower now.
I totally agree actually with John, because with virtual reality, you can't explain people what they can expect. You have to show it to them. And after they've seen it, then they know what the potential of it is. And then they start thinking about how can we use it, in which case can we use it. And only to show it to them instead of building a business case first and all the paperwork. No, just make something. It doesn't have to be big, just make something small and let them show it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the right approach. And I was curious because you guys are obviously trying to get in and show the technology internally, but you have external customers where you're primarily working with internal customers, right?
Yep.
And are their expectations met, do you think, with the current technology? Do they often say, what if we could do this? Or
It's like what John said. They don't know what to expect, and because they don't know the technology, so they don't know what there is. We did a test a few weeks ago with our new tool that we have built, the bridge operation. And we didn't know what to expect from them because we don't know how to build a bridge or how to operate a bridge even. So we just started somewhere and did something and make some controls in there from photos. Then we went to those guys and showed it to them, and they said, wow, this is awesome, we need to do this more. And maybe we have to do this controller a bit slower and it reacts a bit faster. But just going to them and ask what they think of it, it opened their minds, and that's amazing to see.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything? Do you think at Chevron, I know you're talking a lot to the internal customers. Is it the same thing where you're trying to just show them the technology, or is there expectations when you get there?
Yeah, so at Chevron, we obviously are trying to get awareness of this type of technology out to the business units, but the way we've taken that is when we, for example, with the HoloLens, when we saw that technology back in 2016, we went ahead and purchased them, not really understanding what business use case we were going to deliver. And that's where we identified, for us, it was the remote expert scenario. We initially piloted that with Skype for consumer and showed the value being very simple. If we can eliminate one international trip, we just bought 2 of these, and that's just the travel time. We have locations in Perth. I just flew there. It was a 30-hour trip just to get there. And then we also have locations in the world that we can't get to all the time. Basically have geopolitical problems that prevent us from going in country. So having the ability to put something like this out there was a huge business value for us. And that's where we immediately started working really closely with the vendor, Microsoft, to try to address all the issues and gaps that we saw with the technology. So number one, getting it on a production enterprise grades background or technology, which ended up being Teams. And then also addressing some of the safety aspects of it. So, is it for us intrinsically safe? It's Class 1 Div 2 now. Got that certification through them. The face shield being impact resistant, and the hard hat adapter. So getting all these things addressed, there's a lot of things to work through, getting it on our network, getting it through our security compliance processes. There's just a lot of steps. So that journey has gone on, and we're just now moving that into production as the software has become available.
Yeah, I'll say that I think I definitely agree with you guys, and I think there's still so much to be explored with the technology that's out today. So I'm not surprised with any of the answers. Hey, Alex, I was wondering, just in your kind of travels, and I know thinking about your manufacturing background, where you're currently at, what kind of applications are you seeing deployed just broadly in the market? Like, how are people using the technology, maybe some of the use cases?
Yeah, I'd say there's maybe 3 or 4 of the top use cases. So we can start in manufacturing. One of the big ones there is work instructions. And obviously, you have to think about the use case and really work with the employees and understand, is the technology a good fit? 'Cause it's not gonna be a good fit for all of the work instructions, but when someone needs their hands as they're assembling something, I think you guys have heard some conversations, some talks by Peggy and AGCO. That's a great use case when they're up on the tractor and they need to be assembling things using both hands. It's a perfect example for a heads-up display where you can get all of that information, go through all your work instructions. You don't have to carry an iPad up there with you. You don't have to go down to a workstation. So manufacturing work instructions is one big one. The next one I would say is logistics. Again, if you're carrying a pick list in one hand and a scanner in the other hand, what's the one thing you can't do? Actually pick the thing that you're trying to go get from the warehouse. So that's another great example of using the heads-up and hands-free. You can use the devices these days, barcode scanning, show the pick list, scan it, let you know exactly which items you should or should not pick, where to put that on a cart. DHL has a great example of that out on YouTube that shows their overall solution. The third one I would say, and we kind of talked about that here, is the remote service. I think Ed kind of alluded to that if you can save 1 or 2 trips of an engineer, that's going to pay for the device 3 times. We're seeing a lot of ROI from that, where you can do the remote service. If someone's less experienced out in the field doing a repair and they need to call back to the OEM, call back to the headquarters, they can just put on a pair of our glasses, fire up a video call, and you can now have that interaction, and you save the time, the money of the engineer traveling out to the site. Then I would say those are like kind of the 3 standard ones. Then you're seeing some different use cases. Later today, I'm doing a presentation, a case study, and I'll show how they're using our glasses on the runway in Singapore. So with Airlines, how can they more effectively load the luggage onto the plane? Because every minute the plane sits on the runway, it's very expensive. So how can you turn that around? So we're also seeing some unique use cases like that as well.
That's excellent. Hey, Megan, I know recently you guys have done some projects where halfway through you had to work with the building owner, and I'm thinking about the new soccer stadium, and kind of your use case seemed really unique, where you got to walk in potential players. And would you mind just walking through that a little bit? Because I think that's a really interesting use case.
Oh, sure. So what Jereme's referring to is the new soccer stadium in Los Angeles for LAFC, which is a brand new football club. And through our explorations with VR and AR, the ownership was very supportive of exploring all kinds of technology. And we tried everything. We tried all the game engines, all the plugins. We even partnered with an outside company, Rock 360. And we were able to create together these VR experiences where when the soccer team was recruiting players, they could take them into the stadium and show them what it was going to look like before anything was even built. So they're competing, of course, with other owners that could bring a soccer player into an existing stadium and show them, look, this is where you're going to be. So some of the fun things that the visualization had to include were customized lockers with the players' names on a jersey hanging there. They'd walk onto the field, they'd see themselves playing up on the screen, so there'd be a ball they could kick. And then another use case was for helping the stadium finalize their licensing deals with different sponsors. So when they were kind of shopping around and seeing whose logos were going to go where in the stadium, we were able to provide real-time experiences for all of these possible vendors to decide which would be the right one to go in.
That's excellent. I thought that was a really interesting use case where you're adding a tremendous amount of value to the building owner, which makes sense. I mean, business models are changing so fast. So Chris, I want to ask you the same question with one little twist. I want to throw you a little side pitch, if you will. We're in baseball, so we're in the final throes of baseball season here. I don't know what a side pitch is. I made that up. A knuckleball, how about that? So Chris, I would ask the same question, like just applications that you're seeing with a twist. Would you also talk a little bit about what we might see in the next year or two, some things that you guys are thinking about or that you've seen in the marketplace? So applications now, but maybe some of the things you might see in the future too, short-term future.
Phew. I think training will be very big the next few years. We are working on a tool at the moment, actually, which makes it possible to create a multiplayer training in an aircraft where the trainer is capable to adjust the things real time and keep those things also updated to the entire team who's playing in real life, so or in the training environment. I think that will be very big the next 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right with multiplayer and
multiplayer training,
being able to see that,
which is interactive, and yeah.
Are you guys doing any of that today, or is it just start kicking off?
It's quite difficult to create. We are still building this one, and we are quite far. I think the release will be end of this year, finalizing that. So it's so difficult to create those things because it wasn't that easy to make a tool that is capable to adjust things when you are in a virtual environment. The trainer has to, if he wants a fire at a certain place, he can just click and drag it to the place where he wants to, and the people who are the trainees who are in that environment will see it immediately.
Yeah.
That's a challenge because it must be in real life, real time. So it's not that easy to create. We are working on it for 7 months now, I guess, and yeah, it's going well. But yeah.
Will you use a particular hardware or multi versions of hardware? Have you guys thought
That's
about
an interesting part that you ask. We create this on multi-platform because we also want to have a backup for people who get sick in VR actually, because there are a few people who can't handle VR, get sick, noisy or whatever. And you want to have to give them an opportunity also to train. So they can do it on a tablet, on an iPad, on an Android device, on a Windows device even, or in VR with an Oculus Go or an HTC. The entire scope actually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes sense. Ed, I would ask the same kind of twist with you, kind of the applications you mentioned, remote mentor and stuff like that. Are there things you're seeing a year or two down the road that might benefit Chevron as a whole?
Yes, I mean, with this technology, I mean, first of all, we see it getting better every year. It's very early days. It's kind of a Gen 1. We think back to the first iPhone we might have had and how those evolved so quickly. So with the hardware being more powerful, also we see the hardware being more cloud connected. So a lot of the limitations we have today, we think will go away from a rendering perspective. We'll have more connectivity to the devices around us where they'll be able to communicate directly with our headsets. But the other use cases that we're really focusing on right now is looking at things such as kind of the BIM model that was spoken about a moment ago, being able to take our 3D models and basically bring them to scale, walk out into the field locations that we have, and actually have them rendered at scale, and be able to verify that they're going to, be able to be built like we expect them to be built. So progressing those use cases and a lot of work instructions. So we have a lot of complex machinery out there that's very, very complex. I mean, old or new, it spans the range, and we have the whole shift change of people retiring. So being able to develop those work instructions and basically have those kind of holographically overlaid the equipment, having multiple panes of data around that engineer there in the field, being able to track as they're doing it, record their actual interactions with that equipment. So we see a significant amount of opportunity there to basically improve the safety and the operations in the field.
Excellent. Hey, John, I'm going to switch it up just in the interest of time. So I was wondering, thinking about your traditional business, you guys have been in business a long time. How's the adoption? Like when you bring these technologies into the field, because a lot of us deal with, and I have a lot of customers say, it's one thing, the technology is amazing. It's another thing to get people to use it. I was curious if you'd just share with us a little about your experience on how you get people to use it. What's the reaction in the field?
Right. Construction industry is probably the last industry to be digitized, right? They've been building buildings for thousands of years. We've been in business for 135. You talk to people in the field, they can do it with a pen and a piece of paper most of the time. So getting and affecting the business is a tricky thing because construction is very tight margins, very tight timelines, bringing new technology in that to people that work with their hands, or people that are used to building things, not technologists. It's hard to get them to adapt to it, and we look towards the younger generation a lot of times to prime that pump and get people in the business using it that are younger, so they have a lot more open to technology. They come to work with iPads where a lot of the other groups come with pen and paper.
Yeah.
But I think once you get it into the business, and particularly in Kiewit's a very competitive company internally. So if you see somebody on the other side of the business doing better with a piece of technology, like drones, for example, and saving a lot of money, then other areas of the company want that because one area is doing really well, and that's a competitive advantage. Even though we're not really competing against each other internally, it's a pride type of thing. So, and it's really just about getting out and showing the technology to everybody, letting them do hands-on with it, letting them get more comfortable with it, and let them see the art of possibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Alex, I was wondering, because you could see kind of a lot of different verticals and customers. Anything that you're seeing as like best practice as people bringing these technologies, internally or certainly externally to the field?
I mean, first it has to be, it can't happen in a bubble. And it has to be, a mindset for the company. So if you look at some companies, if you don't have that technology mindset, people are just going to see it as a tool and not want to use it. It has to be really integrated throughout the business, and then understanding the right use case. That's one of the biggest things we see is not trying to take a piece of technology to find a problem. It's have a problem and then find the technology that will solve that. So again, it's really understanding the problem and making sure you have the right tool to solve that problem and not trying to just force something in because it's the cool new toy out in the market.
You have to use the tool, you have to use virtual reality as a tool and not as a solution.
Yep, and then coaching along with that is helping people understand how to use the technology. I think John made an interesting point how they were helping with the younger generation kind of drive that technology in. I was visiting someone using wearables, and I asked that question, is it a lot of the younger generation bringing that technology in, and are they the ones that want to adopt it? And I was surprised by the answer that it was actually, at first, the older generation pushed back a lot. They didn't want to use it, and it was new technology, they've been doing it their way. After they were coached and were brought up on the technology and used it, it was actually the older generation that preferred to use the technology because they saw the 20, 30 years of experience that they had in the hardships and the pitfalls that were in those 20 years and saw how that technology could help augment their work and bring that forward.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Hey, Chris, you said something that I thought is interesting on adopting this, which is you didn't know about the bridge technology, you didn't know where the controls were, you kind of built it, which is that new model, right? Build it, get it out, and then work with them. That approach, we kind of talked, it seems like it's really worked for you guys where you're partnering with your customer, which is the different divisions.
Sure, but you actually have to because they don't know what's in there, what kind of technology is there. And that's what we see all the time actually when we put some demos somewhere, they are looking at the glasses and they say, wow, that's fancy and it looks all pretty cool, but does it really work? But the moment they put it on, they see the potential of it. So what you actually need to do is take them along with the technology there is, step by step. When you go too fast, take for example a high-end VR application, they will be blown away by the graphics and all those kind of things and think, wow, I'm so surprised about what I see. But they don't see what the potential of it is because they are blown away from it. So you have to do it small steps at a time.
Yeah.
Use 360 video first, so they will look around. After that, interaction on it. Then use high-end or higher-end applications, and then you can go out with it.
I was hoping you'd say that because I thought that was really interesting when we talked. So essentially, you can go too far, get them too excited, and not really see the benefits and the steps that you can do. So I think that's actually...
It's like driving a car, I always say. When you get your first license, you don't go driving in a Formula 1 car the first day.
I think that's really good advice, but I bet it happens a lot where people kind of go to the exciting, cool stuff.
Sure, yeah, but like I said, then they're overwhelmed by the experience. Like the first time they do a roller coaster, they said, well, I'm getting sick in the roller coaster. Yeah, but okay, but if you try this, with some other technologies and those kind of things, the thing is that when they start to do that roller coaster and they get sick, they said, well, I don't try it anymore because it's making me sick and all those kind of things. Actually, you lose that one as a customer. So you have to restart to build it again. But if you start slowly and climbing up, and do the right thing at the right moment, then you get some support on it.
Yeah. Hey, Megan, it seems to me when you're doing something where you're helping the building owner, which obviously next time they go to do something, I'm sure they would go back to you guys, that you get a lot of people in your organization excited. Have you had pushback in the organization? Is there areas, like Chris was saying, where maybe they did showed a little too much, or is there areas where you've kind of said, oh, let's do a restart? I'm curious.
So yeah, there's definitely a divided opinion about when the right time to bring VR technology to a client is. The life cycle of a design project. Sometimes, you have a conceptual idea of the building and maybe you've really only figured out one part of it. So you would show a really nice rendering for that and kind of kick other parts of the design to the next phase. So if you put a client into VR too early, they might get attached to a layout that you haven't fully resolved yet and is not the best solution. But the advantage of bringing it to clients early is it's as if, it's the Middle Ages and no one knows how to read but one guy in town and he's telling everyone what the book says. And that's kind of how the architect has been. The client is just kind of trusting you for years. So they're giving you millions of dollars. They're bringing equipment and materials and people from all over the world to build this project. And then on opening day, they're gonna have to love it, right? Because it's done. So what's really exciting about this is that it's giving owners an opportunity to make sure that the space is exactly what they want and in ways they might never notice. So one of our first clients to use the VR technology with was Kobe Bryant. He was working on an idea for what he might do in his retirement after he finished with the Lakers. And he was thinking of opening up this foundation. And as he did a VR walkthrough through the space, he'd loved every drawing so far, but then he says, oh, I want to sit at my desk. So he goes and he sits at his desk in VR, and then he looks around the room and he said, oh, there's nowhere where my kids can sit and do their homework while I'm here. So immediately it's like, oh, this is going to be a really important part of this guy's day. We never would have known until he actually had this kind of embodied experience in it. So that's why I advocate for early VR and often VR, and then hoping that we can educate clients along the way that, yes, this isn't quite what it's going to be yet, but it's worth it for you to kind of understand the whole design process. A lot of people just can't visualize it all. If you look it up, there's a condition called aphantasia, and it means if you ask someone to think of like a blue ball or what they had for breakfast, they see nothing in their mind. And a lot of the time, those people are our clients. So it's really an amazing tool to bridge this condition that a lot of people don't even know exists.
I told you this panel was good. I think that was really interesting. And I know in different ways, you guys all kind of said the same things where, giving that technology out, which is a change, especially in construction, you usually don't see those things till the end. So I think that's really interesting. And I know you have that same in training. And Ed, you explained the same type of thing where people were being able to use this technology and actually handle things that they couldn't do in the past. So that leads to kind of the, when you're talking about internally rolling this out and developing it, I'm curious if you'd share, is cost a thing? Is that the thing? Like when you think about a training application where you can bring people to a particular area versus having an aircraft or a simulator, is cost a thing Chris, when you guys are thinking about this and what technology to use and what software to use?
No, I'm not looking at the cost of the tools that we use. I'm looking for the case. Each case is different, and each case has a different approach for it. The costs are quite easy to, to eliminate actually after you build it. So, the training that we have for the cabin crew, the first time they go see the aircraft, they used to go to the aircraft and they need to have a bus to go there. 2 trainers need to go there. There are 15 trainees who are going. They're losing an entire day for it. There needs to be an airplane on the ground for it. So we built this in VR, which was quite easy actually. We used 360 videos just to explain every step in the aircraft. That saves us up to 70,000 euros a year.
Yeah.
So with an effort of 5,000 maybe?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to build something and then see what happens. It's just, you don't have to be high-end on everything. Just start with small steps and then you'll see it's quite easy to build.
Yeah. Megan, how about in your space? Is cost something that's thought about up front, or is the benefit so big it just doesn't really matter?
No, cost is always at the front of our minds. So Gensler's an employee-owned company. We're one of the largest ESOPs in the country, and we're a service business. So we only get paid for hours we bill. And we have no debt. So we don't have these vast resources of money for R&D. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is kind of on a shoestring, volunteer efforts for champions trying to develop innovative things in a competitive environment. So that's kind of been how we've blossomed, is by just saying to people, see what connections you can make, how can you apply this to a project you're on right now. We don't have a group of technologists that are divorced from the practitioners, just kind of working on things in an environment. Everything is tested on a project, and only after we get a client's permission to kind of use them as a guinea pig on something. So.
Is there conversations around for-profit stuff? So billing hourly, like is that an option?
We only bill hourly, so.
But when you build something in VR, you build that out to the customer?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Ed, how about you? Cost of consideration?
Yeah, so it depends on the price of oil. No, it does affect our business, obviously, but Chevron has a very vast group of businesses. So upstream typically is less cost-focused as some of our more commodity-based businesses like our downstream business and refining. So it does change. I have some business units that, their major capital projects are in the tens of billions of dollars. So this doesn't really factor into there. They just need the capability. But it is always something that we're focused on. So I would say, yes, it's a factor. But if the business value is high enough, we typically move forward with it.
John, how about you? Would you?
Yeah, cost is always a factor, especially in construction. We have very tight margins. Each job is usually run as its own separate business and own separate costs. So they're very considerate of cost with that. To get technology in their hands, a lot of times from the technology group, I work in the home office. I'm an overhead. We will give them the technology for free to get it in their hands for a proof of concept and show them the value of it. Because we know eventually they'll see the value of it and come back and say, okay, that's going to save me money in the long run. If next project I use this on, it's going to add value to it. And a lot of our people are very transitory. They'll work on a project, we'll get technology in their hands, and then they'll move on to a new project and take technology with them. So we a lot of times when we're using technology, we seed it out there and let them explore it and move it on.
So do you hear like, oh no, we could never use this in this particular part of because it costs X amount of money? Or is that once they kind of get on board, they'll figure out how to do it?
Usually once they get on board, they'll do it. But what we do here is early on in the process, if we're doing proposals, Kiewit works with a vast clientele, and Kiewit's a large company. So I often get, you have to pick and choose which client you use it with, because it's kind of like pulling up in front of their building in a Ferrari. They're going to say, well, Kiewit's a really expensive company to work for. You're a Fortune 300 company. We may not be able to afford you. You're bringing HoloLenses and all kinds of AR and VR, and I just have to go with the mom and pop. So we do pick and choose where we use the technology as a perception.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Alex, quickly, is there anything you would add to that around, is price the issue, convincing people to use it, or a combo?
I think with it still being quite early in the industry, a lot of people are trying to find those use cases and the right solution for that. So cost does come as a factor there. And, we've looked at that, there is, in the industry, you have the hardware, the software to bundle together for the solution. And some people just want to buy the hardware to see if it's the right hardware and try a simple use case. And in the past, that was a challenge because you bought the hardware without the solution, without the software, you couldn't do anything. You could just, it's like having your phone and no apps on there. So to kind of help with that, we developed a very low-cost solution that could get it just in the hands of people and have them try it. Some might be okay with that solution. A lot are going to want to move forward, and that then provides an upgrade path to all of our great solution partners. And I see them doing the same thing as well. So some of our partners, some of the software providers in the next door room have pilots in a box. So a low-cost solution for a temporary time frame that can help you get started, see how it works. Or a trial period that's going to be a lot lower of an implementation cost, again, for a set time frame to help you try to explore those use cases and see if this is a good solution, and then migrate. Because once you see the value and the ROI generated, then they're okay accepting the larger costs and the full platform solution. So I do see that as an issue, but I see it already starting to change in the industry with hardware and software providers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, I'm looking at the time, and we're going to open it up to questions shortly here. But I don't want to leave without us talking about like some of the soft considerations or pitfalls or just things, safety, things that might come to mind. Maybe just go down the line and just, Chris, would you mind just sharing? Are there some things where, you mentioned a few.
I know you were adding to. One of the safety issues with virtual reality that we find out, and I'm not sure if I can tell this because I know there are some people of Airbus in here, but what we found out, we did a test on a simulator with virtual reality. We put 33 people in there, put them glasses on, and run some flight levels with them. We did a just easy flight with normal flight routes. So one with some turbulence and one with a rapid decompression on board. So the simulator is really lifting forward, turning over, and people are screaming and yelling. What we noticed actually was that the people who were in VR, they had a task to do. They need to go from point 1 to point 2 and from point 2 to point 3. What we noticed actually that almost no one reacts on it. They all keep their glasses on. And that's quite surprising because I didn't expect that, because there was even no sound on it, so it was not that immersed as we think. But that keeps you thinking about when you use virtual reality in an aircraft. It's quite dangerous actually, because you have no idea what happens around you. So that's one of the things that we think, that can be dangerous.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Megan, how about you? Just some considerations.
It's an interesting story because I think air travel is a good analogy. When airplanes first came out, there wasn't even really like a windshield, and you're going at these speeds that make anyone sick. And now it's no different than if you're getting on a train. A nice person hands you an alcoholic beverage, you're comfortable, you barely notice except for the takeoffs and landings. So I think with VR, we really need to work as a community to create that experience of going into VR as being really comfortable. Don't let someone just grab the headset and put it on for the first time. Show them how the controllers work, make sure there's enough room, make sure they've seen you clean it. All of those sorts of things so that there's a little bit of showmanship because you are taking them into this kind of magical realm. So
that's a really good point. Ed, how about you? Are there things to consider?
Yeah, I think one thing to make sure you don't forget is think about the whole life cycle of the device. So for us with the HoloLens, we have to think about how do we manage these devices long term. And so the whole IT infrastructure, making sure that's handled and just works, because that's the most important thing for most of these field workers, especially is this is a tool. They need to be able to turn it on. It needs to work. It needs to work every time. And if every time it fails, that's going to be a time where they're going to next time maybe consider not using it. It's interesting though with AR, we actually don't really give them a lot of guidance. We basically put it on them and let them go. And with them, given that they can still see their physical world, they haven't run into too many problems. And a lot of them pick up the gestures pretty quickly, or they'll go through a quick tutorial. So it's actually moved pretty quickly from that perspective. But think about the full life cycle of the device.
Yeah, and I just play off of what you said. In this session or these sessions, I've heard a lot about their struggles of implementation and getting devices out there, how IT blocks things trying to get done, or security blocks. I'm in IT, so I know the struggle.
So you're the guy.
I'm the guy that's blocking
everybody.
I lock the doors. But when we at Kiewit, when we implemented HoloLens, we were in the first wave of it, so it was very early on. We actually formed a SWAT team, a self-forming team, and we included different areas of the company from networking and security to be part of the group and be part of the team so that they could help us get it implemented. And, if you get their buy-in, you get them to be part of the game, then they're going to help you. And we had no problems, getting it in the infrastructure. It's supported in our company. It's one of the showcases of things that we do. So I think just getting people involved, getting them part of your team. If you're not in IT, bring somebody from IT onto your team.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, before we move to you, John, I have a question on that. Did that come from the top? Because I mean, that's a dream, right? Everybody, you have the group. What often really happens in the real world is everybody has projects, right? New ERP system, new field services, whatever it is, and there isn't time for that. Like, did it come a top-down initiative for everybody to be able to form that group, or was it just, it naturally happened?
Yeah, it started from the top. We were very fortunate. I think we got the HoloLens and didn't know what to do with it. So a lot, and we didn't have a group formed when we first got it, but we did find select people that were key players in the organization that we knew were good at certain types of things. We had project management people, we had communication people, we had networking, we had developers, of course, and graphics guys. And fortunately, it did come from the top down that, here's the new technology, we think it has value. Give your people a little bit of leeway so that they can work on it. And we were working on it, in our basements at home on the weekends, right? Because it was cool.
Yeah.
And then we showed the value, and now we have teams that are dedicated to working on that technology.
That's awesome.
Just to build on that, I mean, so we did a similar thing. I mean, we had rolled out the iPhones across Chevron over the last, I guess, 6 or 7 years, and we have like 20,000 now. And so we took that model and said, look, we want this to be that simple. We want it to be as supportable, as easy to use. And so, yeah, we integrated with those teams, and we found kind of the service owners and designed all that out to make sure that it could be rolled out flawlessly.
Yeah, that's really smart. Hey, Alex, how about anything to add there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing would be, if you look out there, go to the presentations here, there's a lot of use cases. You look on the internet, there's 10 times as many. So it's great to think big, but start small and scale fast. So find that use case that might not require the full end-to-end digital thread integration. Seeing all the CAD models might be great, but if you don't have that CAD library built out, it's going to take you 2 years to convert that to be able to use those models in that immersive experience. So find one that works for your business, whether it's a simple see what I see video call that, again, is saving thousands of dollars for companies. Start that, start scaling that, and then start looking at the other solutions. It's very easy, especially I think in this industry, to get overwhelmed by all the possibilities of what AR can do, and then you don't start because you don't know where to start.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think people do get paralyzed because the technology is really cool, and there is a lot that you can do with it.
And I think one other thing is it's moving so quick. So the other thing I do see is people say, I'll wait for the next device to come out, or that new technology, placing everything positionally fixed perfectly in the world. But it's always this technology is moving at such a quick pace that at some point you just have to get started and then adapt and migrate as the new technology comes out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hey, so